Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you coming to this session. How's everybody doing? So we're going to have a panel with these lovely gentlemen. Each of them is from one of our partners, executives in the product and engineering side of things. We also have a former Googler up here as well, Debanjan. We'd like to keep this interactive, so there's a mic here. If folks would like to come up and ask questions at different points, we're going to go through a series of questions. But again, we'd love to keep this interactive with this audience. So with that, I'm going to kick this off. I'm Claude Robinson. I lead our data analytics partner marketing team. And my team has the luxury of partnering with these great companies, Databricks, DataRobot, and MongoDB. Many customers out there that have deployed the solutions across these three organizations. And with that, I'm going to kick it off with introducing each of these gentlemen. So first up, we have David Meyer from Databricks. Debanjan Saha from DataRobot. And we have Saha from MongoDB. So David, tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, so I've been with Databricks, we were just talking about it, for about 6 years. It was a lot smaller then. And you know, it's a platform for doing data and AI together. And one of the main, it started off with things like Spark and innovated a lot on top of that, but really its foundational architecture is what we call the lakehouse, which is taking all the kind of abilities of a warehouse and putting them directly into the data lake. And with that, you can manage all of your data in one place. You don't have to move it. Data scientists don't have to work in a different stovepipe than data warehouse people, and it yields enormous efficiencies. It wasn't possible 5 years ago, but with a lot of advances it is. And now we work with a lot of the Google fundamental things like BigQuery on the same formats in the lake, so you can do all of your analytics and machine learning and LLMs and generational AI, all of these things in one place. So it's really exciting to be here with my friends.
All right.
And quick question for the audience. How many of you guys looking at Databricks today or playing around with it or touching things? Show of hands.
Awesome. And feel free to grab me afterwards if you have any detailed questions.
Next up, we have Debanjan from DataRobot.
So, as Claude was saying, this is almost like homecoming. I was in Google for 3 years running BigQuery, which I hear has now become bigger. And some of the other products, which was like Lake, has now become Big Lake. But I have always been a robot and finally found the right company to work for in DataRobot. So DataRobot, by the way, if you don't know about what we do, we call ourselves the systems of intelligence. It's kind of fancy way of saying that we sit between the data layer and the application layer, and we extract insight from data and we make applications more intelligent. And if you look at, double-click that a little bit, what is that we actually do? There are two fundamental things that we do. One is what I call the AI command and control center. There are a lot of our customers who have a lot of models built over a period of time using various different tools. Many of them are kind of in spreadsheets. They're trying to manage them. Deploying them in various different environments is not easy. And monitoring them is a pain in the butt. Okay, excuse my French. So what we do is kind of put all of these things into a registry so that people can manage them from one place. We deploy them in whatever endpoints we want to deploy them on, and then we manage and monitor them from a single pane of glass. So that's one piece of what we do. The other part of it is essentially building those models. Right? So there are, of course, people have a lot of data, and we do feature engineering and feature discovery so that we can identify what are those data points which makes real difference to people's business. Then we build those models and compare them with various different alternatives people have so that they can see which models works best, and then make it available for deployment. So these are the two pieces of what we do, and of course, we work with both Databricks and MongoDB, and a lot of our customers have that data environment, and of course with Google.
Thank you very much. Same question to the audience. How many of you guys have been looking at DataRobot or kind of kicking the tires? Show of hands. A few of you.
I see a lot of opportunities.
And then last up, we have Saha from MongoDB. Been working with you and your team for a while, so tell me a little bit about your company, Saha.
Sure. So thank you for having us, and thank you all for joining. I've been with MongoDB leading the product organization for 7 or so years. I originally joined to lead our transition to the cloud, so I've been lucky to work with Google Cloud for over 7 years in terms of shifting our platform from an open source enterprise software technology to a cloud database platform in close partnership with all the hyperscalers. So for those of you who are not familiar, MongoDB is the leading modern operational data store in the market today. We are in all 37 Google regions. I think that's the most recent count. It's constantly changing. And we really serve developers. And with the big wave of generative AI now pulling ML and models much more to the forefront of operational applications, the live customer experience, we're really seeing a big acceleration of adoption of our technology, and we're working closely with partners like Google, Databricks, and DataRobot, and empowering sort of an end-to-end loop of more intelligent applications.
Thank you. And again, for the audience, how many of you guys are either using or kind of checking out MongoDB?
Nice.
Nice.
So, gentlemen, we're going to make this kind of an interactive discussion between the three of you. So, we saw a lot of discussion today from Thomas and others around Gen AI and the power of Gen AI that we're bringing to enterprises. If an organization is kind of driving a strategy around data and analytics, what do they need to look at when they're kind of integrating that with Gen AI for innovation and growth? What are you guys seeing?
Who wants to start?
You?
Sure. I mean,
That way I can disagree with you.
So the Gen AI, by the way, I mean, it is the iPhone moment for the whole world, right? I mean, AI has been around for a long time. I mean, there are people who have been using AI for a long time. But I have never seen something like this in a long, long time. I was in an investor conference a few months back at Morgan Stanley, and every investor, of course, asked me about Gen AI. On the way back, the Uber driver quizzed me for half an hour about Gen AI, and I realized that AI has finally arrived.
He's worried about it replacing him.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that would be a different kind of Gen AI. But the power of Gen AI is, the way I kind of view this, AI, of course, can do a lot of things. I mean, if you look at predictive AI, it has been very, very valuable in a lot of industries. But it's not easy to explain it to people, right? I mean, you need some basic knowledge of maths or statistics, even if you automate everything. That's not the case with Gen AI. It's text in, text out. People can very easily understand what it is. And it's also very easy to figure out very, very low-hanging use cases that can generate immediate ROI for people, right? Making essentially the workforce very, very productive. And that's what kind of is so striking about it. I mean, one of our investors actually always talk about, so what is the boring problem you are trying to solve? AI, of course, solve a lot of very, very interesting problem. But Gen AI can solve a lot of really boring problem, which is what is driving a lot of business interest in it. On the other end of the spectrum, there is a lot of very, very interesting problems, scientific problems, which can change the way people live their lives, or many societal changes can actually come from that. That is also very, very exciting. And this is, of course, a great opportunity for all of us. And I know, David, you are kind of waiting for this. I mean, I actually think that there is a lot of course, excitement about models that's going on. I remember 10 years back, 8 years back, everybody was talking about what algorithm people are using for predictive AI, hyperparameter tuning, and all of this. None of those matter all that much right now. I think in another couple of years, which model you're using is probably going to be less useful. And I think ultimately people have access to all the data that they need in order to train those models.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's actually going to be, how do you create value from these models, mapping the business problem into AI problem, and actually solving it in a way which creates value for the business is what's going to be where most of the action is going to be.
Yeah, I agree in a lot of ways. The joke of disagreement was, he was saying 20% of the problem is data, and I was saying 80%. He's like, you're a data guy. Of course,
95%.
95, 99.
Because you hold it all.
So a colleague of mine with a customer yesterday was describing it as, the data platforms, obviously there's a lot of that at Google, is the cake. And then there's some great cherries you can put on it, which are the models. But I think I totally agree with Debanjan that the cultural shifts and how you're applying it, you can do really, really dumb things with LLMs. And you can have a bunch of failed projects because they're just like whims. So and we'll talk about this more, but obviously, one problem with LLMs is hallucinations. But you can change the training set and stuff like that with data that's curated to eliminate those. But then you need the data to be right. And that's a lot of the problem of the upstream. So a lot of it is getting your data in a place that everybody in your org can leverage it, including through LLMs, and then figuring out all the, operationalization of that, which is hard.
Sarah, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, it's one of the things we're observing. It's to Debanjan's point, the idea of models and AI has been around a long time, and certainly the Gen AI, ChatGPT boom has certainly unlocked all of our imaginations in terms of the applicability of it and created all this current hype around it. But I think in a lot of ways, what we're seeing with AI and ML is a shift left. If you go back 10 years, you saw operations give way to DevOps, and that shift left into software, that automated processes. We then see the same thing happening in security. You're seeing security move from a centralized security team to be embedded in the life cycle of development up front. So you can manage that much more from a development point of view. I think the same thing is starting to happen with the move from large-scale training to much more around real-time inference on the backs of every development team in all of our businesses needing to think about how AI can power these smarter application experiences. So a big part of what we are focused on is really democratizing the experience of taking these models, taking the proprietary data that all of our organizations have, which in many ways is our core value, but making it operationally capable for any team building amazing software and user experiences.
Yeah, and just one within Databricks, we classify these into 3 categories, and you probably do for your own business, okay? So there's exposing, Copilot-like chatbots within Databricks. That's one class. So we're exposing LLM to the user. We also have a platform so companies can build their own models and LLMs. So that's giving them the platform to build their own tooling. And then we also use these a lot inside, totally invisible to the customer, to run better as a company. And those are kind of, whenever we talk about it at eStaff or whatever, we want to say, is it type 1, 2, or 3 to classify those?
Yeah.
Same ones?
So let me ask you this, again, looking at the audience and we had a different show of hands of different platforms people are looking at. Let's say individuals are trying to implement something at their company. What are some of the key considerations to look at when you're looking at different data sources and different platforms across Mongo and Google Cloud and DataRobot and Databricks as they're starting out? So here, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think our lens, obviously, on the kind of developer or operational end of the spectrum is how do we bring the skill set that's typically been in sort of a centralized team, walled garden specialization of data science or ML, and embed that now in every operating team that's building and shipping production services. And there's different organizational models and skill set kind of changes that need to happen for that. But I think to really unleash the power of whether it's Gen AI or just ML more broadly in an organization, I do think it needs to be viewed as a core competency of a much broader set of the ecosystem, even if there is a domain specialist team, who are the experts. So I think focusing on that, getting that, whether it's a matrix model or just building up the skill set within these groups, certainly is something we've done internally to enable sort of the capabilities in our own platform. But as I go out to the 40,000 plus customers we have and see the best practice, the most cutting edge teams don't view data science as data they throw over a wall to a team that trains it, and then they get a model that's a black box back, and then they execute it. They're really got that data science team embedded, just like a designer is, an engineering lead is, a product manager is, as part of that core development process.
Debanjan, what do you see when you're out there kind of looking at that consideration to build on those various data platforms using these technologies?
I think one of the big problems in enterprises are really the data silos, right? If you think about the assets an organization has, it's their customers, various different physical or non-physical assets that they have, their employees, and their IT assets, right? And typically you have these vertically integrated systems where all of these kind of siloed in various different systems of records and which is integrated with the systems of engagement. And you get much more value if you can kind of cut across these various different silos, right? So for example, you have your data in Salesforce, which is very useful in figuring out if a particular customer is going to churn. But that customer is also calling the call center, and if they are having problem with the product, I think if you can map these two, you get a lot more intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what people are trying to figure out, how exactly to do that. I mean, are they going
to put them in a lake house?
That would be one way of doing that. I think, then they have to keep doing that all the time. And by the way, that's one solution to do that. Other option would be to integrate them at the modeling layer.
Operational data store.
Integrate them at a modeling layer so that you don't have to move data around. And both of these, by the way, viable, good solution. So what it really means that you need a system where you have open interfaces and open data format, right? Without that, you cannot really do that. And what I would also say, that's kind of table stake for how you build this composable system, right? I mean, we also work, for example, with Databricks, Mongo, and Google in order to do deeper product integration so that we are not just giving people Lego blocks which fit with each other, but also showing them how to fit them together.
Yep.
Yeah, I think standards and abstractions are two really, really key things. So we were talking to, I was talking to a large multinational bank yesterday. And they were saying, you know, they basically have gone deep into OpenAI, right? And I was like, well, be careful because there will be a plurality of models. We know, you know, there's Llama 2, there's all these other ones, and they're going to keep evolving, right? And you might want to be building your own, so you want to have the right abstraction. And they said, yeah, but our developers say OpenAI is easy and all the other platforms are really hard. And that might have been true for a minute, but now we all have those abstractions. So you can initialize with OpenAI, you can initialize with Llama, you can initialize with any type of model. But unless you do that, your business is going to get deep tendrils into one model, which will be perhaps irrelevant for some of your use cases or not usable. So the other pieces, so the right standards and the right levels of abstraction, and then you got to have someone in your legal department get smart on this stuff. Because the problem is it's so easy that it's so easy to really screw up and hurt your IP and get yourself into trouble. So you need to have someone educated in like legal, responsible AI. Different countries are having different regimes, so that's going to affect your practices around these things in the future.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing. I mean, on one hand, we want to make sure we're safely consuming all these technologies that are popping up everywhere. And so, you know, we want legal, we want IT, security, all the on the governance process. But at the same time, we want teams to be independent and move as fast as possible because there's so much innovation happening right now. So finding a way to kind of have a centralized group that can at least share best practices, but still not feel like everything has to be top-down standardized has been a tricky balance to sort of strike.
It gets back to abstractions and standards underneath.
Exactly.
So Debanjan, I mean, you're out there talking to customers. Like, what advantages do you see with, you know, kind of Google's core data platforms and AI with both BigQuery and Vertex AI?
Well, you know, I have, of course, a soft corner for BigQuery. I used to run that for some time. So BigQuery is probably one of the best data warehouses, you know, people have, right? I mean, I wouldn't name the other one here. But there are a lot of customers that we work with, they have their data in BigQuery. And what we have done is a very deep integration with BigQuery, right? So for example, we have our feature engineering and feature discovery that we can push down to BigQuery. By the way, we are doing that for Databricks also, right? So that you don't have to take data out. You can actually do a lot of this filtering work in terms of what are the important features which is going to drive outcome inside the data warehouse itself. Then you build the model. You can also run the model within BigQuery so that if you want to do, for example, batch predictions, you don't have to take it out and then write it back. And not only that, I think the difficult thing in all of this AI business is really the monitoring aspect of it, right? I mean, this is what, by the way, I believe the biggest issue in Gen AI. I mean, you can ask a question to ChatGPT, you get a nonsense answer, you can laugh at it. But when you apply that in an enterprise setting, that's no laughing matter, right? And I think it is very, very important to build those guardrails and the scaffolding so that people have confidence in the output that they're getting. It's safe, it's accurate, and that's where I see a lot of collaboration that we can do with not only BigQuery, but also with Vertex AI, and we have done some of that and continue to do that.
And so here with your company, I know we do a lot with Atlas. You know, Atlas is kind of the first choice for developers as they're building new apps, and you guys are doing work with us with BigQuery and Vertex. You want to add a little bit onto that?
Yeah, I think our collaboration with both Vertex and BigQuery has been quite interesting. You know, we're typically complementary to both in terms of either Vertex sitting on top of operational data in Mongo or Mongo generating all this business data as part of your application stack. But how do we feed that as a source downstream to BigQuery or to Lakehouse? And we've got integrations both ways. So that's been a common sort of architectural pattern that we've seen. these days, one of the newer things that we've been working on and certainly getting a lot of demand for is, everyone's like, how do I embed AI in my application? Well, the big hot thing is vector storage and retrieval and managing embeddings. And the reality is any AI-driven application fundamentally is still an application. It needs transactional characteristics. It might need keyword or relevance-based search, or you need time series capabilities, or whatever it might be. And so a big part of what we're trying to focus on is how do we simplify the experience. So as you're building an application, sure, you might need a vector capability now, you may need some search capabilities, but you also may have metadata or source data in your core database. Should that be for systems, or can we integrate that for a developer in a much more elegant way? And Google's been a great partner in driving that into the market and partnering with us since 7 years ago when we started on the platform.
David, do you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Google's been there since the beginning of all of this. Databricks got created out of academia, Cal, Berkeley, creating Spark, but that was an inspiration to generalize what they saw happening at Google to run search. Like, it's all started back at Google and a handful of other hyperscalers. And then, all of the initial AI stuff inside to run Google has manifested into things like Vertex. So with all of these things, you need scale, you need performance, and you need data at the heart of all of it. And that kind of exemplifies BigQuery and Vertex. So we work deeply with both sets of technologies. And it's one reason why it's a very fun cloud platform to partner deeply with, because of all the origins.
So like about 10 plus years ago, I was kind of in this move of digital transformation, like let's move stuff to the cloud. You guys talked a little bit about openness. Like, why is an open data and AI ecosystem important to this audience as this next phase of digital transformation happens? You want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, so look, you have data gravity in the 3 major clouds, all 3 of them. Everybody does. And you need to figure out how to leverage that. And there's a bunch of toolkits on this stage to help you with that. But fundamentally, data has gravity. And for example, in these lake formats, so you have a data lake and they've been enriched with things. We created Delta, there's Iceberg, there's Hootie. All 3 of those are great formats for taking all the data in a lake and readying it for AI and ML in kind of these technologies. And the fact is now they interoperate because of standards. Those standards have increased the value of so many things people have done because you don't have to get lock-in in the data itself. And it's the core of so much these days. So basically, it future-proofs your investments. The technologies underneath will change. The models will rotate. The things you can do on top of these formats will change. Vector embeddings and these kind of things are going to transform a lot of these applications. But working together in consortiums on these standards is really important. For example, I think there's going to be standard LLM model interfaces. So we have our version in Databricks where you can initialize with OpenAI or Llama or these other ones. But we're going to standardize that because it's good for the industry, and then all of us can work on our core competencies and kind of raise the water and all the boats float high. What's some saying there?
Rising tide.
Rising tide. That's it. Yeah, the rising tide.
Debanjan, what are your thoughts on?
So, I totally agree, by the way. I think, one of the things that used to happen is that you have this vertically integrated application with data inside it, right? And when that happens, it's very difficult to cut across and kind of, pick the insight, which sometimes resides across these multiple silos, right? And the table stake here is really having a common data format or standardized data format. It doesn't have to be one, and a standard API. And if you have that, a lot of other things kind of fall into place. One thing I always tell customers, before coming to AI, I used to run databases and data warehouses. I think what you should ask every vendor that how easy it is to move in and how easy it is to move out. And if you have those 2 things nailed, I think you have the portability of wherever you want to run it, and you will pick the best tools or best data warehouse, the data lake possible to do that. So that's the key in terms of figuring out not only the data format and API, is the migration in and out easy for you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, a big portion of why I think people choose MongoDB is that flexibility and openness. You know, the option of having an open source or a software version if they have to train and operate on data that's in the data center, but then having a unified abstraction across Google and the other two hyperscalers, the ability to span operational data across those. We've seen a pattern emerge quite a bit now where, you know, maybe an application sits on a primary hyperscale cloud operationally serving live users, but they want a low latency replica to tie into something like Vertex or another upstack service to be able to run inference or training on that data. We've made a lot of investments to make that experience as seamless as possible, to make it easy for organizations to have that flexibility. And the reality is, over the long haul, user choice and, you know, flexibility is a key consideration for especially large enterprise. And, you know, we've been, from our open source roots, kind of really focused on that.
Yeah, and I mean, the other key we didn't really mention is you need that for negotiation leverage with us.
So if we go look at the real world, you guys are out there talking to customers all the time, and while we've been talking, some of the slides have been showcasing some customers. Can each one of you kind of walk me through a customer that you've talked to who's kind of deployed a data and AI solution with your solution in Google Cloud, what challenges they were facing before, and what were the outcomes that they achieved by implementing this platform? So
yeah, I can start. I used this one in a recent MongoDB keynote because I think it's one of the most fun examples. We're working with one of the large automakers, you would all know the name, and they're piloting a project right now where they record a bunch of sounds of common car problems across their, you know, models and years of cars. They vectorize that and store that in a vector store engine with MongoDB. And the idea then is that their technicians can record the sound of a car that has a problem, do a similarity search, and figure out what that symptom is, what the root cause of that sound and issue is. So it's kind of like, for those of you who have an iPhone, it's like Shazam, but for car diagnostics.
Would that work for pets?
Yeah, probably.
Well, it's interesting, because a lot of us take our cars to the dealer and we say, we've heard this sound.
It's got a funky
and
sound, exactly.
The dealer drives around trying to figure out what it is.
But if you think about it, like for this car manufacturer, they've got first-party and third-party technicians across the globe. Their fleet is global. So the idea of shrinking down the diagnosis time from an hour or two or improving the accuracy and bringing that down to seconds or minutes is huge when you extrapolate the savings. The step two is then saying, all right, once you know what the problem is, there's a bunch of either digital or physical manuals that have the step-by-step instructions that the technician follows to repair the issue. Well, now they're vectorize the full text in that to create a basically natural language interface so they can just say, hey, this is this sound, this is the step-by-step natural language extension of how you actually go fix it. So that's kind of one of the most interesting, I would say, enterprise use cases that we've worked with. A more fun one was, I saw a startup out of Southeast Asia sign up for our service a few weeks ago that does personalized fast fashion. So they use Gen AI, you give it a bunch of parameters, it'll generate a shirt for you or pants or whatever your dress, and then they tie the loop with contract manufacturers, so it'll actually go create a version of that custom piece of clothing and ship it to you all in sort of a few minutes. So it's taken like the idea of like Zara and these fast fashion kind of brands and leveraging AI to personalize it all the way down to the individual.
David, what have you been seeing with customers that's interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's a lot, you know, there's only certain ones that are nameable.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think Google is so foundational from a technology perspective. We talked to BigQuery and Vertex, and like, for example, it was the first place that we used like a managed Kubernetes engine because the evolution kind of started at Google, and GKE was so powerful. And so customers, a lot of customers that are multi-cloud, we see a lot of them bringing more and more gravity to Google because of these performance characteristics and what they can do. And it's like, you know, processes that might have taken 24 hours before, working collectively with both of our respective engineers, getting it down to 30 minutes, you know, going from batch to streaming, because the power of the technology and the scale is there, and the TCO benefits are clear, especially with those reduction of pipelines. So like the being able to, a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of regions and a lot of clouds, and then where it's possible to do it in Google with these technologies, we see people seeing enormous benefits.
And Debanjan?
So, you know, I also cannot probably name the customer, but it's a major healthcare provider. And by the way, the demo is kind of running in our booth if you want to go and check it out.
Don't they see the logo then?
I don't know if we have the logo. You kind of mask the logo.
They'll tell you.
The URL?
So what they really do, two things. One is a triage system. So when customers come into an emergency room, the information about their past visits as well as the doctor's notes are all stored in various different Google platforms, including BigQuery. And we kind of pick that information from BigQuery and the vectorized version of that from a vector database. And we actually do two things. Predict what is the triage level is, whether it is critical or other levels that we have. I think there are 5 levels. And when we have to schedule that, those are the two things that we come up with, and produce a summarized note for the emergency room doctor explaining what the issue is and what are the things from the past visit and the medical history they need to be aware of that we generate automatically. And on the way back, or on the way out, when the patients are actually discharged, we predict their readmission probability, how likely that they are going to be readmitted, and why, and then create essentially a discharge sheet which tells the patient and the discharging nurse in a nicely written English paragraph rather than a lot of numerical data, that these are the things you have to be careful about, and if you do ABC, then it's going to reduce your probability of getting readmitted to the hospital.
Okay.
So it's actually a pretty interesting use case.
Sounds
And
easy.
so that's the demos in your booth?
Yes.
We'll come down and see that later. For you gentlemen, what industries are you seeing take the most advantage of AI analytics right now? Which ones need to catch up?
So the 4, from our business, it's a snapshot, not everybody is probably the same. The 4 primary industries we have, financial services, which is really a data business. Yep. There's a lot of AI ML there, and they are getting more into Gen AI. Healthcare, retail, and manufacturing, right? Those are kind of the primary industry segments that you see, but there are also others. For example, there is a lot of AI ML used in oil and gas. There is a lot of AI ML used in telcos, for example. So those are the other areas I've seen.
Yeah, it's funny because the verticals you just listed were our biggest for AI and ML, kind of until LLMs, and now there's it's totally ubiquitous.
That's right, that is true.
It's like, you can't have a conversation
That's right.
without addressing that thing because it generalizes it to anything humans can do.
That's right.
Becomes more productive.
Yeah, that is absolutely right.
Basically the same thing we've seen. certainly financial services, healthcare, retail.
Fraud and all those things, they've been true for 20 years, been using this, right?
That's right.
But, I think right now everyone's interested in it, from new startups that are spinning up all the way to established brands across every vertical.
What would your recommendation be to the audience, if they're looking to deploy something to kind of scale more data-driven decisions and uncover insights from what they have today? Like, what are those steps you would give them to kind of move forward? Sarah, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe take a bit of a controversial stance on this that's MongoDB-ish. I think the idea of getting insights from your data is boring and 10 years old. I think it's about how you get those insights and actually turn it into experiences for your business or your end customer that allow decisions to be made faster in an automated way, or to deliver a more delightful customer experience, or to drive a more efficient business outcome. I think for a long time, getting insights for your data meant people like me look at a dashboard and make a decision, and that takes a couple hours to a few weeks to get that insight. Now I think it's about how do we shift that left and really make that something that everyone can experience to differentiate in the market.
Yeah, I think you hit on something valuable, because even as a consumer, I've, in the past, doing any type of stock investing, I'd go and do my research, buy stocks here and there, and now they've got AI solutions where it'll go and research every analyst report, press release, everything that's out there that I can't even do. It would take me years to do and make buying decisions in real time.
A kind of similar view. I think what we tell customers to start from value and walk backwards from there to figure out what is that you need to create, right? Whether it is a business decision you want to make, whether it is asset pricing that you want to settle, or whether it is, for example, a triage call you need to make. You have to first figure out what that business problem is, map it to an AI problem, then map it to whatever data that you need and whatever ETL pipelines you need to build. If you walk backwards from that value, I think you will see the outcome a lot more quickly, and that will make it easier for people to establish why they need to spend money on technology, right? That has sometimes become an issue.
Yeah, the danger is it's so easy, it's so ubiquitous. You yourself are going to throw it at a dumb idea. Just because there's so many ideas, it's hard to figure these out. One thing that's kind of we found is kind of counterintuitive, that the less human aspects of the chat bot things sometimes have remarkable fidelity. Like, for example, there's code that we haven't upgraded everywhere because it's life. But moving between like Spark versions or to a data frame API from a RDD API, it's shockingly perfect at. So like there's things that are more mechanical in nature that have a true answer that it can be shockingly effective at. And then it can also be great at the kind of soft, like research type things, which can save people a lot of time, but that's less quantitative, quantifiable. So if you pick something that's more kind of hard skill in nature, which you might not think of LLMs as hard skill based, you can prove the ROI so fast that you can get funding for more similar things. And the training set is often right there in the public domain.
We've seen a similar thing. I mean, for our business, a big portion of what we focus on is modernizing off of old legacy technology.
Yeah.
We found LLMs really effective at taking a look at old, SQL code, stored procedures, stuff that's been sitting around.
End of life warehouses on
The person
premise.
who wrote it's no longer even working at the company, and then spitting out sort of a modern version of that either for a data
All of
frame
our developers
as well.
use it
It's
to be more
amazing.
productive.
Yeah, that stuff it's so powerful for.
What role are you guys seeing with governance with data management in the new era of AI? You want to take that one, Dave, to start?
You ask these like sweepingly broad questions. Well, I don't think you can really do it without AI. I'm saying AI inside of your governance. Like all the archaic ways to crawl data and detect if it's PCI data are like so manually intensive compared to what you can do with some of these newer models. So like data tagging, discovery, governance, seeing people do the wrong things with data through discovery and tagging with LLMs is so powerful. Like we have this huge data set in the system we call log food with all the telemetry over time. Almost no table has a description. Do you know how hard it is to govern a catalog when no table has a description? You can generate bang-on descriptions using almost no GPU, CPU resource in seconds with these models. And your whole organization gets better. Now the governance team can do their job with a lot more fidelity. So like, just bake it inside because you have too much data, you have no idea where it is, what it is, or who uses it, and that problem is a lot more tractable with AI.
It probably cuts both ways. I think I totally agree with you. I mean, a lot of things that we didn't know where things are and what they are, you can classify them. Now, on the flip side of it, there is probably a lot of data sitting on various different places. They are sensitive data. People didn't know how to access them, search them, and you can actually find them now, right? So I think you have to be careful about how we make it accessible to people. For example, if you just take enterprise search, for example, right? I mean, you want to create this embedding and the vector databases, and of course, various different data elements have various different access control. And you have to make sure that the search that you're developing is also echoed. Otherwise, whatever data you have available in enterprise, now through a bot, it's accessible to everybody else.
Or in the public domain.
Or in the public domain, right? And other side of it, I mean, probably a more complicated thing, that people don't know what data these LLMs are trained on, right? And they inadvertently might expose you to sometimes legal issues where they give answers which probably should not be available to you, right? So there are a lot of tricky issues that we need to address, and that probably is going to be one of the big areas of exploration.
A fun little thing Databricks did. Well, first of all, we wanted to show that you could have a lot of effectiveness with a small model. So we open sourced this model called DALL-E, but it needed a training set that you could commercially use.
Right.
So our CEO, Ali, told everybody in the company to write questions and answers 1 week. And then we use that to open source in a commercially viable way this training set, 5,000 questions and answers. But the funny thing is, like, people ask us about DALL-E all the time because it was good PR. But don't use the DALL-E model. The DALL-E model is no good for your real business applications. The training set, though, use it. You can use it for any commercial purpose, and it's inside Llama because it's very useful. So like the training data is very critical, and knowing, having transparency exactly what data sets were used to train the models you're using is important.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for your time.
Please.
Thank you, everyone here, for showing
Thank you
up. These guys will be available for a little bit if you have questions. Thank you.